There's something about pumpkins that goes beyond pie and autumn decor. They sit on porches, glowing in the dark, their hollow eyes flickering in the night. But in the world of comics, pumpkins are far more than seasonal decoration. They become weapons, helmets, living beings, and symbols of fear, power, and magic. The roots of this iconic image reach back to ancient Celtic traditions. Samhain marked the end of the harvest and the approach of the dark half of the year, a liminal time when the veil between worlds was thin. Gourds, carved and hollowed, were placed as protective talismans, as warnings, as invitations to the spirits that roam the night. Centuries later, Washington Irving would immortalize this imagery in the legend of Sleepy Hollow, where the Headless Horseman hurled a pumpkin at his prey, forever cementing the carved gourd as a symbol of terror. When comic book creators began to explore Halloween imagery, the pumpkin was a natural fit. Its grotesque shape and symbolic weight gave rise to characters who wore it as a mask, embodied it as a living entity, or transformed it into a supernatural weapon. From Marvel villains to DC heroes, from Vertical's metaphysical entities to Malibu's extra-dimensional tyrants, pumpkin-headed figures have carved their place in comic book history. This is the story of Gourd Pantheon, a journey through fear, heroism, magic, and horror, told through the faces of pumpkins that have haunted our pages for decades. Jason Macendale was more than a villain. He was a prototype for the fearsome jack-o'-lantern identity. Emerging in Machine Man number 19, Macendale was a mercenary and assassin, and a figure whose very appearance was designed to unsettle. His flaming pumpkin helmet glowed in the dark, a signal that danger had arrived. In his hands, pumpkin bombs were more than gadgets, they were statements, perfectly shaped symbols of chaos. Every encounter Macendale had was designed to reinforce his terrifying persona. He fought Spider-Man in alleys and abandoned warehouses, each strike of his pumpkin bombs echoing the flames of legend. But Macendale's story didn't end there. In 1987, he would become the Hobgoblin, leaving the jack-o'-lantern mantle behind. But the pumpkin helmet remained, a visual legacy waiting for its next inheritor. Into this vacuum stepped Mark Levin, appearing in Captain America number 396. Levins was a professional criminal, a man who understood that fear could be weaponized visually. The pumpkin helmet, the costume, the gadgets, they weren't just tools, they were his identity. Levins took the jack-o'-lantern brand and extended it beyond Spider-Man, into a global criminal underworld. His pumpkin bombs weren't mere props, they were meticulously engineered weapons, designed to terrorize and manipulate. He joined groups like the Skeleton Crew and the Thunderbolts, proving that the pumpkin image had power not just as a mask, but as a recognized symbol of menace across the Marvel Universe. Each encounter reinforced the visual and psychological weight of the gourd. His story became a blueprint for all who would follow. Next came the Mad Jack era, a confusing but compelling chapter in the Jack-o'-lantern legacy. Daniel Burkhart and later Maguire Beck shared the mantle, each using illusions, high-tech tricks, and the fearsome pumpkin helmet to manipulate their foe. Here the identity transcended the individual. It became a mythic symbol, a reputation that could terrify regardless of who wore it. They battled Spider-Man with a blend of cunning, theatricality, and carefully engineered chaos. Each pumpkin helmet became a weapon not just of fire and explosives, but perception. The gourd's carved visions, glowing and intimidating, made enemies question whether they faced a single villain or a legend that would never die. In Venom number 1, in 2011, the archetype transformed. Prime Master's protege fused with a mystical demon, giving rise to the first jack-o'-lantern with true supernatural power. The pumpkin was no longer a helmet, it was a living, sentient, malevolent force. He waged war not just on heroes, but on reality itself, a demonic manifestation of chaos. His powers went beyond technology. He could manipulate dark energy, induce fear, and survive attacks that would destroy ordinary men. Here, the pumpkin identity became horror incarnate, a living nightmare born from decades of symbolic evolution. Finally, Owen Ward, debuting in Venom number 166, returned to a technologically advanced jack-o'-lantern, while carrying the accumulated legacy of his predecessors. His battles against modern heroes were not just physical, they were ideological. The pumpkin helmet now carried the weight of history, reputation, and fear. It symbolized decades of storytelling, menace, and myth, cementing the jack-o'-lantern as one of Marvel's most visual, iconic legacies. DC's take on pumpkin-headed characters diverged sharply from Marvel's villain. While Marvel used the pumpkin mostly as a mask, a weapon, or later as a supernatural instrument of terror, DC transformed it into a symbol of heroism and mystical authority. The first of these heroes, Daniel Cormack, appeared in Super Friends number 8 in 1977. Unlike the tech-laden assassins of Spider-Man's world, Cormac's power came from a magical lantern, a small but potent artifact that allowed him to wield fire, fly, create illusions, and amplify his strength. Cormac's adventures weren't street-level skirmishes, they were global, often involving magical conspiracies, threats to entire nations, and confrontations with supernatural beings that ordinary heroes could barely comprehend. In his hands, the lantern could create blinding light, towering constructs, or localized bursts of flame. But the real danger came from Cormac's ingenuity. He learned to bend the artifact's magic, using shadows and illusions to outwit his foes, proving that a hero's mind could be as formidable as any mystical power. The mantle didn't stop with Cormac. Marvin Narosa and Liam McHugh later assumed the Jack-o'-lantern identity, each adding layers of depth and strategy. Narosa's studies in mysticism allowed him to manipulate energy and shadows in new ways, responding to fear and courage alike. McHugh, meanwhile, leaned into heroism on the global stage, defending nations and facing threats that demanded diplomacy as much as raw power. Collectively, these heroes elevated the Pumpkinhead from mere imagery to a symbol of disciplined power, morality, and heroic responsibility. What's striking about DC's Jack-o'-lanterns is how their adventures intertwine with the world around them. Unlike Marvel's Lineage, which constantly shifted identities and technological gimmicks, DC's heroes maintain continuity, learning from predecessors and building upon each other's legacy, tying folklore to modern heroism, magic to ethics, and visually reminding everyone that power could be both feared and revered. Mervyn Pumpkinhead. Shifting gears from mystical heroism to conceptual existence, we encounter Mervyn Pumpkinhead, introduced in Neil Gaiman and Sam Keith's Sandman. Mervyn is not a man in a mask, not a hero wielding an artifact, nor a villain seeking destruction. He is the Dreaming's janitor, a sentient, self-aware entity whose carved pumpkin head sits atop a working man's body. Smoking a perpetually lit cigar, carries himself with the weary confidence of someone who has seen a millennia pass and managed them all without losing his edge or sense of humor. Mervyn's daily duties might sound mundane, cleaning, organizing, repairing, but in the context of the Dreaming, they are life or death responsibilities. Nightmares, rogue dream spirits, and metaphysical anomalies constantly threaten the fragile balance of this universe. When danger arises, Mervyn confronts it directly, often armed with little more than his wits, a broom, and the symbolic weight of his gourd-headed presence. The pumpkin atop his shoulders becomes a visual anchor, an emblem of authority, and a reminder that even in a realm untethered from reality, rules and order must exist. What makes Mervyn endlessly compelling is his personality. Sarcastic, blue-collar, stubbornly pragmatic, he contrasts sharply with the abstract elegance of Morpheus, the Lord of Dreams. He embodies the idea that even metaphysical worlds need grounded, relatable figures. In essence, the Pumpkinhead is not a weapon nor an identity. It is a symbol of functional power, of presence and permanence in a universe of constant change. The 1990s brought darker, more terrifying interpretations of the Gourd motif, none more extreme than the Lord Pumpkin of Malibu Comics. Debuting in Sludge number 3, Lord Pumpkin was born as a magical plaything for a prince, only to evolve into a cosmic tyrant of unimaginable cruelty. Commanding the Pumpkin Legion, his goals were nothing less than domination and the installation of fear on a planetary scale. Lord Pumpkin's power was both mystical and strategic. His pumpkin head wasn't merely symbolic, it radiated energy. Tales from this era describe vast battles where entire cityscapes became stages for his power plays, minions clashing with heroes while he orchestrated chaos from above. His glowing pumpkin head a beacon of malevolence. Unlike Marvel's tech-oriented villain, Lord Pumpkin existed beyond the human scale. A nightmare made real, blending horror, magic, and military genius. His reign of terror was punctuated by spectacular defeats and narrow victories, each adding to his mythos as a gourd-centered apex predator of the Ultraverse. Not all pumpkin-headed figures inspire dread. Jack Pumpkinhead, originating in L. Frank Baum's Oz and adapted into comics, offers a whimsical, adventurous perspective on the motif. Constructed entirely of wooden limbs, topped with a hollow pumpkin, Jack is animated by Tip's magic to act as a friend, protector, and sometimes accidental hero. His stories are lighter in tone but no less engaging. They explore loyalty, clumsiness, and a peculiar bravery born of innocence. Jack's adventures in Oz are rich with imaginative settings, enchanted forests, magical creatures, and confrontations with witches like Mombi. Every scenario is a chance to explore how the Pumpkinhead can function as whimsy rather than terror, demonstrating the breadth of the Gourd archetype across genre. Even his hollow, seed-filled brain has a charm of its own, a comedic counterpoint to the darker, more menacing Gourd figures in superhero and horror comics. The modern indie horror scene takes the Pumpkinhead to its darkest extremes. In Pumpkin, Paige is attacked, left for dead, and returns transformed. Her pumpkin visage is both terrifying and deeply personal, a literal manifestation of vengeance. Unlike magical artifacts or tech suits, the pumpkin form is inseparable from her body, her identity, and her story of survival. Paige's narrative is intense, violent, and emotionally charged. Each encounter with her tormentors is a lesson in horror storytelling, meticulous, patient, and steeped in the visual impact of the glowing pumpkin that now defines her existence. Her revenge is surgical, precise, horrifyingly effective, demonstrating that a pumpkin head can be a vehicle for personal empowerment, narrative catharsis, and mature horror. The influence of the Pumpkinhead extends far beyond the pages of Marvel and DC, or the creative nightmares of Malibu and Vertigo. To understand the full scope of the archetype, you have to look at the cultural and narrative currents that shaped it. And none are more foundational than Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The Headless Horseman is more than a scary story. He is the most common known pumpkin-headed figure. His decapitated form, riding through the quiet landscapes of Sleepy Hollow, creates a visual shorthand for supernatural dread that resonates in every comic that follows. And Irving described the climactic moment where the Pumpkinhead is hurled as a substitute for the missing head, establishes a clear precedent. Comics quickly picked up on this. In horror anthologies, adventure strips, seasonal specials, artists would depict spectral riders with glowing gourds, emphasizing the same mix of fear, mystery, and dark whimsy that Irving first captured. Marvel's Jack-o'-lantern owes a direct debt to this archetype. The pumpkin bombs, the flaming helmets, even the eerie glow of the mask in the night, all trace back to that same idea, an ordinary object transformed into a symbol of fear. The Horseman also helped establish the pumpkin as a motif of identity. In Sleepy Hollow, the pumpkin was a stand-in for a missing head, a way to project presence and personality into the inanimate. In Marvel, DC, and indie comics alike, pumpkin helmet, mask, or head functions similarly. It communicates power, alignment, and intent instantly to anyone who sees it. Beyond folklore, the pumpkin has appeared in licensed properties and niche adaptations, showing its versatility. In Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the pumpkin rapper appears as a playful, almost cartoonish villain. Characters like Sam Hain in the Real Ghostbuster comics also illustrate the broader thematic influence of pumpkin symbolism, emphasizing seasonal, spectral, and magical power. Even villains like Scarecrow and Green Goblin, while not literally pumpkin-headed, help codify the visual thematic space that pumpkin figures would occupy. Fear, theatrics, and the aesthetic of terror as an iconographic tool. Thematically, the pumpkin serves multiple narrative purposes. It is flexible, capable of representing legacy, identity, fear, humor, heroism, or horror. It can be a weapon, a costume, artifact, or a sentient entity. It can inspire terror in an urban alley or whimsy in a magical forest. This flexibility explains why pumpkin-headed characters appear across so many genres, each iteration, from Mervyn Pumpkinhead's metaphysical grounding to Lord Pumpkin's cosmic menace. Paige's personal revenge reflects a different facet of the archetype first codified by the Headless Horseman. In many ways, these peripheral influences form the skeleton of the Pumpkinhead mythos. The Horseman laid the visual and symbolic groundwork. Superhero and horror comics took those ideas and elaborated on them, creating a rich pantheon of characters who could be terrifying, heroic, whimsical, or conceptually profound. The legacy of the Pumpkinhead is one of continuity, evolution, and reinvention. A reminder that even a simple gourd can carry centuries of narrative, artistic, and cultural weight. From ancient folklore to modern horror, from superhero tech suits to mystical artifacts, Pumpkinhead has proven to be one of the most versatile and enduring motifs in comic books. What began with the spectral terror of the Headless Horseman evolved into Marvel's high-tech assassins, DC's mystical guardian, Vertical's metaphysical janitors, and the darker independent horror creations of the 1990s and beyond. Each incarnation add layers to the archetype. Marvel's Jack-o'-lantern showed that a symbol could be commercialized, serially reinvented without losing its visual punch. DC's mystical heroes demonstrated that a pumpkin could embody virtue, authority, and magical potency. True Gourd Heads like Mervyn, Lord Pumpkin, and Jack Pumpkinhead push the trope into conceptual and fantastical realm, proving that a pumpkin could be fully realized, sentient, and narratively indispensable character. Even modern indie horror like Paige and Pumpkin shows that the pumpkin can carry deeply personal, body horror-infused storytelling. Ultimately, the pumpkin head persists because it's both simple and infinitely malleable. Carved gourd can be a mask, a weapon, or sentient being, a symbol of power and identity. It can terrify or delight. It can guard or destroy. It can anchor a dream rail or dominate a cityscape. Its enduring appeal lies in this flexibility, in its ability to embody story, emotion, and spectacle in a single, instantly recognizable image. And there's perhaps no better time to celebrate this iconic motif than Halloween. As the season of ghosts, shadows, and carved lanterns approaches, Pumpkinhead reminds us that fear and fun can coexist in one glowing symbol. Whether it's a mischievous hero, terrifying villain, or conceptual being, pumpkin-headed figures capture the spirit of Halloween perfectly, straddling the line between fright and fascination, legacy and reinvention. So, as you carve your own pumpkins, watch your favorite spooky movies, or dive into comics this Halloween, remember that behind every glowing gourd is centuries of myth, imagination, and a rich history that makes the Pumpkinhead one of the most enduring symbols of storytelling. I hope everyone out there has a spooky, fun-filled, and unforgettable Halloween 2025. Keep your pumpkins glowing, your comics close, and your imagination even closer. Happy Halloween! Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.